Wait, before you decide to cut her off completely, thinking silence is your ultimate weapon, pause. Let's stop pretending that no contact is some magical spell that will suddenly reverse her emotions, make her miss you, and come crawling back. It's not. In fact, more often than not, it backfires, because it's not your silence that makes her long for you, it's what you did before that silence. That's where most men get it completely wrong. They hear the advice, go no contact and she'll come running. So they vanish, they pull away, they cut off communication, thinking that this act alone holds power. But silence without presence is meaningless. If your presence never left a lasting mark, your absence won't either. She won't spend her nights missing you just because you stopped texting. She'll simply adjust to your disappearance. Because in her world, nothing really changed. And this is where the illusion kicks in. You believe no contact is working because you feel stronger. You feel like you've regained control. But inside her mind, if you weren't unforgettable to begin with, then silence is not mysterious. It's just irrelevant. You become another guy who disappeared. Another name in her call log she doesn't bother to dial. And worse, you gave her the gift of peace, time, space, everything she needed to slowly forget. What you really want is not to disappear, you want to disrupt. You want to plant thoughts she can't shake. You want your energy to echo in her mind long after you've left the room. But for that to happen, you need to create emotional weight before you go quiet. You need to show up in a way that grips her memory, not with words, but with the way you made her feel, safe, challenged, desired, and maybe a little off balance. The truth is, silence can only amplify what already exists. If there's a fire, stepping away might make it burn hotter, but if there's no spark, silence is just cold air. You're not building intrigue, you're fading away. And that's not what you want. So instead of focusing on going quiet, focus on becoming unforgettable. Be so present, so intentional, so emotionally gripping that when you do step back, she notices the void instantly. She doesn't just see that you're gone, she feels it. She questions it. And that questioning, that's where the real power lives. Don't chase the illusion of no contact. Chase the reality of lasting impact. Let me ask you something. When you walk out of a room, does she feel it? Or does she just scroll to the next notification and forget you ever existed? That's the part no one talks about. Everyone is so obsessed with how to disappear that they never ask what they're leaving behind. And if you leave behind nothing, then that silence you're so proud of, it means nothing too. See, what most men forget is this. Women don't get haunted by absence. They get haunted by impact. It's not your silence that replays in her head. It's how you made her feel before you went silent. That's the emotional imprint, the mark, the thing that lingers. And if you haven't made that imprint, you could vanish for weeks and she'll sleep peacefully through it. That's the brutal truth. It's not about texting her less or blocking her or walking away with this fake power trip. It's about who you were before the silence. Did you make her feel deeply seen? Did your presence spark curiosity, safety, excitement? Or did you just blend in like everyone else trying to impress her? Because if you didn't light an emotional fire in her, there's nothing for her to feel cold about when you go silent. You become forgettable. And a forgettable man has no leverage. Think about the people who still live rent-free in your mind. It's never just because they left. It's because of what they left behind. A feeling, a moment, a disruption. That's what lasts. That's what loops in her head when she tries to move on. That's the real game. Not the vanishing act, but the psychological imprint. So instead of focusing on cutting her off, ask yourself, did I give her something to crave, something to question, something to remember at 2 a.m. when the world is quiet and her mind has nowhere else to run? That's the work most men skip, and that's why no contact fails them. You don't want to just disappear. You want your absence to carry weight. And weight only comes from presence that mattered, emotional connection, subtle unpredictability, moments where she felt alive, understood, and a little thrown off. That's the formula. That's how you get under her skin, by being unforgettable, not unavailable. So if you're planning to go silent, make sure you've earned the silence first. Because when a man has left a real emotional imprint, He doesn't need to block her. He doesn't need to ignore her. His absence speaks loud enough, and she'll hear it every time she tries to forget. That's how you become the one she can't shake. Stop letting her decide the pace. That's the first thing you need to understand. The moment you allow her to set the tone, the rhythm, the emotional temperature, you've already given up the power. And that's what most men do without even realizing it. They react, they wait, they chase, or they do the opposite, they disappear, hoping that silence somehow gives them back control. But that's not leadership. That's emotional surrender dressed up as strategy. If you want to shift the entire dynamic, stop following her lead and start setting the frame. That doesn't mean becoming controlling or cold. It means learning how to move with purpose. To stop waiting on her cues and instead create the tempo of the connection. When you speak, when you respond, how you respond, it should all be intentional, not desperate, not reactive, just calm, firm, and unpredictable. Women feel the difference immediately. A man who leads emotionally doesn't need to play games. He doesn't need to explain himself or ask for permission. His energy does the work for him. He knows when to lean in and when to pull back, not because he's trying to manipulate her, but because he's attuned to the power of timing. And that, more than silence, shifts everything. Let me give you a deeper truth. Women don't obsess over men who are always available or those who disappear completely. They obsess over men who disrupt their emotional rhythm, the ones who engage just enough to spark hope, then pull back just enough to make them wonder. That contrast, that tension is what keeps her emotionally invested, not confusion, but uncertainty. It's the difference between being predictable and being powerful. But to do that, you have to take back the frame. If she texts, you don't need to respond instantly. If she pulls back, you don't panic. If she tests you, you don't flinch. That calm confidence is rare, and when she feels it, it's unnerving in the best way. She starts questioning herself. She leans in just a little more. And the more she leans in, the less you need to do. This isn't about playing hard to get. It's about being hard to move. Because the man who leads emotionally becomes the center of gravity in the connection. She orbits him, not the other way around. And once you've positioned yourself like that, you no longer need to go no contact. Your silence becomes a choice, not a tactic. And that choice holds weight because she feels the shift. She knows you're no longer playing by her rules, you're setting your own. That's when the chase begins in reverse, when she starts to feel pulled, not pushed. And that's when you stop needing silence to be powerful, because your presence already speaks louder than words. Let me tell you something uncomfortable. Most of you aren't disappearing, you're just vanishing into irrelevance. You think going silent is making her miss you. You think no contact is creating this emotional storm inside her. But what if I told you it's not? What if instead of wondering where you went, she's just moving on? Because the truth is, absence doesn't always create longing. Sometimes it just creates space. And if that space feels peaceful, she won't chase it. She'll protect it. What you want isn't emotional absence. You want emotional disruption. That's the difference that nobody talks about. Disruption stirs emotions. It lingers. It creates a mental pause, a question, a tension that she can't quite shake off. That's what keeps her up at night. Not just because you're gone, but because the way you left broke a pattern, hit a nerve, flipped the script. That's what real psychological impact looks like. But most men miss this. They think silence equals power. So they stop texting, they block her, they ghost, but they were never emotionally significant enough to begin with. So their disappearance feels like relief, not mystery. And instead of disrupting her rhythm, they exit quietly while she simply resets and moves forward. That's not power. That's background noise fading away. Disruption is about energy. It's about shaking her emotional expectations just enough to make her feel something she didn't expect. It could be how calmly you handled a situation, how you walked away, not out of bitterness, but out of strength. It could be the way you went silent after showing her depth, making her feel safe, and then suddenly making her question why you're no longer there. That gap between what she felt and what she now doesn't have, that's where disruption lives. And you don't have to be loud to disrupt, you just have to be felt. So before you walk away, ask yourself, did I stir something deep enough that my absence will echo? Or am I leaving behind silence where there was never sound? Because if you don't disrupt her emotional comfort zone, you're not making her chase, you're giving her closure. The goal isn't to disappear. The goal is to be remembered without being present. That's disruption. That's the man who lingers in her thoughts while others fade away. It's not about doing nothing. It's about doing something so precise, so emotionally sharp, that silence becomes the loudest thing you've ever said. When your presence created disruption, your absence doesn't just get noticed, it gets felt. And that's when the real shift begins. You want to know what really drives her crazy? It's not your silence. It's your unpredictability. That's the part that messes with her mind. Not knowing when you'll show up, not knowing what version of you she'll get. It's the moments where she thinks she has you figured out, and then you surprise her. That emotional unpredictability is the push-pull tension that fuels her desire far more than going completely cold ever could. When a man goes completely no contact, it's one straight line, flat, predictable, easy to understand. And once she understands it, she adjusts to it. She adapts. And once she adapts, she stops feeling. But when you create emotional contrast, when you're warm one moment, then distant the next, not in a manipulative way, but in a confident, composed rhythm, you shake her emotional foundation. She can't settle into certainty, and that's what keeps her thinking about you. This isn't about being toxic. This isn't about playing games or being inconsistent just to hurt her. It's about understanding a deeper truth. Attraction thrives on curiosity, and curiosity is only born when the outcome isn't guaranteed, when she can't predict your every move, when you don't follow the script that every other man follows. The man who messages her every morning, replies instantly, compliments her non-stop. That man is nice, but he's predictable. Predictable means safe, yes, but it also means boring. She might like him, but he won't consume her thoughts. He won't live in her mind when the phone is silent. But then there's the man who is intentional, who shows genuine warmth, gives her just enough of his presence to light a spark, but also knows when to pull back and leave space for her to wonder. That man? He's unforgettable, because she doesn't know what's coming next. And that gap between her expectations and your reality, that's where her emotional investment grows. When you master this kind of emotional push-pull, you never have to completely disappear. You never have to block her or ghost her. She's already hooked, not by silence, but by uncertainty. By the mystery of not knowing where she stands with you. And when a woman doesn't know where she stands, she doesn't relax. She leans in. She chases clarity. She starts reaching out more. She starts wondering if she did something wrong. And in that space, you control the frame. So forget about cutting her off entirely. That's what every man does when he's hurt. That's what men do when they think silence is the only way to win. But you become unforgettable by being emotionally dynamic, calm, confident, unpredictable, not needy, not avoidant. And that's when you stop needing her attention, because now she needs yours. Let me ask you this. If every man is doing the same thing, how do you expect to stand out? Seriously, everyone's out here playing the same tired game. Ignore her, cut her off, go silent, wait for her to miss you. It's become so predictable that it's no longer powerful. Women expect it. They've seen it. They've been through it. So when you do the same, you're not making a statement. You're just following the crowd. You become forgettable, one more echo in the background of men trying to win through silence. But the man who rises above the rules, the one who doesn't need gimmicks, who doesn't vanish to prove his worth, that man becomes the exception. And trust me, women remember the exception. See, she doesn't crave another guy who disappears. She craves the man who speaks when she least expects it. The one who doesn't get rattled, who isn't operating from ego or desperation. The one who knows his value so deeply that he doesn't need to use silence as a weapon, because his presence is already potent. That man, he breaks patterns. He changes her emotional rhythm. And that's exactly what leaves a mark. You don't get under her skin by copying tactics from broken men trying to regain their pride. You do it by becoming a presence so calm, so composed, so layered that she starts to feel something she hasn't felt in a long time. Uncertainty about how she affects you, not because you're playing games, but because you're not playing at all. You're living, moving, choosing, not reacting. When you become emotionally intelligent, when you can stay centered, when you don't flinch at her hot and cold behavior, when you know when to engage and when to pull back without resentment, something powerful happens. She stops seeing you like all the rest. You're not predictable. You're not desperate. And most importantly, you're not trying to win her. You've already won yourself. And that shifts everything. That kind of man doesn't have to use no contact, because his energy alone speaks volumes. His silence isn't empty, it's intentional. And his presence, that's what haunts her. Not because he played hard to get, but because he became someone impossible to forget. So don't aim to be like every other man playing emotional hide and seek. Aim to be the man who doesn't have to play at all, the one who broke the rules, not to manipulate, but to lead. That's the kind of man she never sees coming and never sees the same again once he leaves.